I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we gather, the Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and the Dja Dja Wurrung people of the lands of which the Bendigo Law Courts is located. And sorry, I should have introduced myself firstly. I'm Megan Derbyshire from Wardle, and this is Megan Dwyer from Wardle as well. So the Bendigo Law Courts is a multi-jurisdictional court building. It's positioned over 5 different levels. We've got 9 courtrooms, 2 hearing rooms and 2 mediation suites with 15 holding cells in the basement. It's located in Bendigo Historic Centre, and Bendigo itself is quite a low-rise city. So one of the, elements that we looked at was how do we break down the building mass so that it actually fits well into its context. So we looked at this through a series of design elements, breaking down the internal programming itself, which allowed us to then choreograph internal views outside. Also, the idea of an articulated silhouette was linked to the Victorian spires that exist in the Bendigo skyline. So we wanted to create a building that had a modern interpretation of a spire. And then this idea of a singular expression, whether that was in the material form or in the actual built form itself. So the spatial programming is broken into 2 strands in the court building. The left-hand side is for the public areas, and they're a bit more transparent in their nature. When you're standing in the forecourt, you can peer in and see those waiting spaces. And then on the right-hand side, the courtroom functions where you're focusing on the task at hand. That's behind a more solid copper facade. Inherent in the project is some sustainability initiatives. I won't go through all of them, but we are an all-electric building. We're targeting a 6-star Green Star, and it will be net zero operational, and did have a 92% local content associated with it. We developed 8 design principles, one of which was a people-orientated court. Courts obviously have a number of different users, so we needed to look at that from all aspects of who would be arriving at court. And when you do arrive at court as a public member, you're likely quite stressed. You may have never been there before. So we wanted the materials to respond in a way that created a calming environment. So we did that through the use of timbers, also quite a muted palette as you move through. And on the upper levels, access to natural daylight in the public waiting areas, and also outdoor terrace areas so that you could just get some reprieve after you had passed through security. Within the courtroom spaces as well, this is quite unique to court settings in that we have windows. If you go into any of the existing courts in the city, they're quite dark and muted, and that was to focus on justice. And something through consultation was the idea of actually we need it to be more therapeutic, so access to daylight and also views is important. Culture of place was another one of our key design principles, and we worked very closely with the Dja Dja Wurrung. We developed a series of internal themes that related to local flora in the area, and those themes are present as we move through the different levels. So the first theme was kangaroo grass, and so you'll see that in the timber selection we chose. The terrazzo tile has bronze flecks, and then the elements of green in the palette on the tiled wall behind. Going through the upper levels, yam daisy, so there's pops of yellow, bluebell, and lastly, ironbark. And these accents of colour are both in the courtroom and also in those public waiting spaces. And they double as a wayfinding tool. They're also linked to the digital wayfinding, and in the brass cast handles that we have into the courtrooms, there is a small element that references the colour as well. So just pausing on this image here, This was one of our key themes about the choreographed views. So this view here, looking out to what was the original Bendigo Law Court, was quite important to reference that existing spire in the city skyline. Something that we're very passionate about at Wardle is the idea of collaborating with artists and what we can learn from craft. And present in Bendigo is the Bendigo pottery. So we worked with artist Simon Lloyd to develop a series of ceramic tiles that span from the ground floor up onto level 1. And they note the local flora colour palette as well. There's a number of different artists that we've collaborated in the project, and they appear in an element of different ways, whether it's etchings in a bar table, canvas paintings, or also glasswork suspended in the void areas. And lastly, the third design principle to run through is a functional and flexible court. Court buildings themselves are very complex in their nature, and this court building was the first to have a vulnerable person circulation, which meant we had 5 separate circulation pathways within the building. And to break down the complexity if you were arriving in court, we looked at intuitive wayfinding. So as you arrive as a public member, the void actually opens up to where you'll be going to next. So you come through security into a low area, then it opens up into where your next point is, being registry. And then as you move through the building, those circulation spaces are very intuitive of whether you're in your public waiting and in the court environment itself. We worked closely with the end users and the judges in particular, needing a chambers that was doubling as a court room and also a personal space for reflection. The staff workstation areas have access to daylight and have a threshold that bridges the public frontage and also the back of house requirements. And then just touching on the courtrooms here, we went through a series of prototyping and testing. On the right-hand side, we did a digital testing, and that allowed us to look at different heights, confirm sight lines, and then we proofed that up in a physical prototype. And what that's resulted in is quite a number of different courtroom environments. So this one here offers you a skylight. This one here, we have a play element on the ceiling, and you can see those elements of timber coming in. And then just lastly, ending on this slide, this is from the main public level 4 waiting area, and Raquel Kerr, who was a Dja Dja Wurrung artist, developed the bundle that we're seeing in the facade that's woven into the perforation.